Showtime! Welcome to the show. I'm Brent Holland, and welcome everybody. Welcome back to the show. It is New Year's. It is January 2nd. Happy New Year to one and all. Hope you all had a very safe New Year's and a great Christmas. Hope everybody's doing well, and here's to the love of the season and the power of peace for this year. Amen to that. Tonight we're going to go back to the JFK assassination, and I'm going to do something a little bit different. I don't have a guest tonight. Oh no, you say. Oh no. But before you tune in completely, I'm going to be reading or discussing a section from my book, JFK Assassination from the Oval Office to DEALEY PLAZA, and it contains the final interview with Ted Sorensen. The section I want to discuss tonight is breaking down some of the myths that have popped up in the past few years. Now, it's not anybody's fault. The internet is full of, different things. Different people have different views, and they hear one thing and then they take off with it. But I'm going to give you my take on some of the myths that I feel have been allowed to grow in an unhealthy way. And let me just read the preface from this then. I wasn't going to do this chapter because it is a chapter in my book, and for a good reason. I was afraid of pissing off those in the JFK research arena who have done groundwork all their lives. Now, this was done at a time before data mining, what's called data mining on the net, was even a dream. And if you're not sure what data mining is essentially a search engine. Because when you type in something like JFK assassination, sometimes things that were never associated with those two words will show up. Things that were just not available before. So imagine, if you will, going into the standard library in a university situation, and you've got this bunch of books there. And all of a sudden, you figure that you get all the books that have JFK assassination in the titles, but there might be a discussion of the JFK assassination in a foreign policy book, for example. Maybe there was a reason there. So all these things become connected now through the search engine. And it's a pretty exciting time. It really is. It really means that, there's no more snail mail where you mail files back and forth. It takes a couple of weeks for somebody to read them, and then they have to make comments on them and then mail them back. And all of a sudden, what would take seconds now, through either file sharing through a cloud system or file sharing through an email system, takes forever, or even texting. I continue. In those days when one did research, there were no keywords to type in and quickly ascertain only the info you needed. In those days, documents were indeed snail mailed, read, assessed, and then commented upon, and re-snail mailed back. This was the challenge of communication and the exchange of ideas between researchers in those days. Today, in mere seconds, you can sift through relevant documents and cipher out what is factual and what is a stretch. Let me say this. The researchers, every single one of them, questioned everything and still do today. They turned it upside down, they turned it all around, and then handed it off for someone else to do the same. Now, we've got to put context into this. Whenever we look at history, context is essential. It was the time of Vietnam, lies hidden to our youth. It was the golden age, quote unquote, of the CIA, where agents operated freely on their own accord. They committed murder and the overthrowing of governments, often without elected officials' knowledge or permission. It was the time of Nixon. It was the time of Watergate, when even the president couldn't be trusted. It was the time of the Iran-Contra scandal, where operations were carried out covertly by subordinates, leaving the government plausible deniability, quote unquote. It was then, and still remains, a time of challenge to reach the truth. In the paragraphs below, I take some of the loftier claims that have come to my attention over the years, but the JFK assassination. My assessments are based on my interviews with those in the know behind the scenes. Ted Sorensen, for example, all the top researchers. We Fans of the show will know who's been on the show. James Tague, first-person witnesses, Dr. Robert McClellan, the doctor who worked on JFK, etc., etc. What I have read over the years and based on common sense. We begin. A military coup d'etat. Now remember, I prefaced this by saying a lot of people are going to be pissed off at me. Here we go. And that's fine. I appreciate your comments. Just no swearing, okay? No personal attacks. I won't put up with bullying. It's as simple as that. But if you have a concrete response or your own ideas, put them down, articulate them. There's no reason to get crazy about this, okay? It's a discussion. I think the very least we can all agree there was a conspiracy in the John F. Kennedy assassination. We are able to have peaceful dialogue about the causes and peaceful dialogue about the who's and the whys. Okay. For a long period of time, it was suspected that JFK's assassination was indeed a coup d'etat orchestrated by defranchised members of the Joint Chiefs, and with good reason. As I mentioned in the Ted Sorensen chapter from my book, JFK Assassination from the Oval Office to DEALEY PLAZA, the Ted Sorensen chapter, Ted Sorensen stated that during the October 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, that a few of the hawkish Joint Chiefs, mainly those aligned with General Curtis LeMay, were heatedly insisting on military invasion of Cuba and damned to consequences even if it escalated to nuclear war. They didn't care, folks, if it went to nuclear war. They just wanted to go into Cuba. When Kennedy opted for the peaceful blockade as a step to deter the Soviets and Cuba with the hopes of averting the end of the world, they became furious. And what they perceived as a weak response and a weak government and a weak president. Ted Sorensen went on to state that there was a concern that these military hawks were getting out of control and JFK wanted to rein them in. Don't forget, I had a personal one-on-one with Ted Sorensen in his apartment building. We sat across from each other on couches, and we spent the afternoon together. And this is what he was telling me. So if you want to challenge this, I have it all on tape. This is what Ted Sorensen told me, okay, his final interview in the book. Military hawks were getting out of control, and JFK wanted to rein them in. Certainly, coups in other countries have happened for less. So without question, there was motive, and thus why it has been entertained as a viable conspiracy theory for the assassination. However, here it comes, folks. This is what's going to get you pissed at me. Ted stated emphatically that the elected representatives of the people, the government, were always in firm control. It is my belief as well that, quite simply, the people surrounding Kennedy, his hand-picked New Frontier team, would not have stood by for a coup. Kennedy was not only the president, he was their personal friend. There's no way Ted Sorensen, Robert McNamara, Secretary of Defense, in charge of the military, by the way, Dean Russ, Secretary of State, Kenny O'Donnell, Dave Powers, his own brothers Bobby and Ted Kennedy, Eyal, would have stood by while the military murdered their own commander-in-chief and then took power. The most important person that would have never stood by while the military coup took place was the actual chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff himself, General Maxwell Taylor. Now, why do I say that? General Taylor was handpicked for that role by JFK himself, precisely to keep the other chiefs in line and to maintain a clear line of truthful communication between the military and the Kennedy administration. He was the liaison between the two, and Kennedy picked him after the failed Bay of Pigs. He fired Lemnitzer and wanted to put somebody that he could trust in that position to keep the Joint Chiefs of Staff in line, and he picked General Taylor himself, so he was handpicked by Kennedy himself. Taylor, as a matter of fact, folks, was so close to the Kennedy family that Bobby Kennedy named a child after him. So in my opinion, okay, I'm walking on eggshells here, folks. In my opinion, there is no way a coup of this magnitude could remain covert and take place without coming to the surface and exposed for all to see. It is the premise of Oliver Stone's film JFK that a military coup took place with the assassination of President Kennedy and Vice President Lyndon Johnson waiting in the wings, as he says, to assume power. And thus we come to, now let me clarify again, I am not saying there was not a conspiracy. There was. Ted Sorensen also confirmed that to me, and that's in the book. He confirmed there was a conspiracy, okay? Let's be clear on that. I'm just saying it was not a military coup in that sense, okay? Let's continue. Doesn't mean members of the military were not involved, okay? That's not what I'm saying here, okay? President Lyndon Johnson, it's no secret that Vice President Johnson wasn't well liked by the Kennedys, handpicked team of the New Frontier. His fights and skirmishes with Bobby Kennedy are legendary. I would say second only to Bobby's confrontations with Jimmy Hoffa, of all people. Now, given that, if Johnson was involved at any level of the coup, why then did he go out of his way and insist that all of Kennedy's New Frontier team remain at his side after the assassination, especially Sorensen and McNamara? If indeed Johnson was waiting in the wings to assume the presidency after masterminding a plot to kill the president, wouldn't he have brought in his own people and got rid of Kennedy's people? People he knew disliked him for fear that they might investigate the assassination themselves and find out he was behind it? By the way, privately, Bobby and others did launch their own investigations, and Bobby in specific was told it was a mafia hit. Now, let me tell you about Sorensen. Sorensen said he got the quote-unquote Johnson treatment when he wanted to leave. And Johnson wanted him to stay on. He said something to the effect that, well, you know, JFK is up there watching us, and he knows he's guiding us, and he wants us all to stay together. Bobby, Ted, all those guys, Kenny O'Donnell, Dave Powers, Ted Sorensen, all loved JFK like a brother. There's no way Johnson would have had those people hanging around if he had anything to do with the assassination. Georgia Senator Richard Russell was a member of the Warren Commission. When the commission was about to release its conclusion, Senator Russell refused to sign the document, stating he simply did not believe the commission's so-called single bullet theory, what we now call the magic bullet theory, or myself, I call it the Cirque du Soleil bullet theory. Now, President Johnson, somewhat dismayed that a member of his hand-picked Blue Ribbon Warren Commission would dissent from the commission in an attempt to clarify Senator Russell's position, well, he decided to give him a phone call on September 18th, 1964. Senator Russell was adamant about not believing the magic bullet theory and stated to Johnson, "I don't believe it." What is explosive is what came next. Johnson's own admission about what he personally thought about the magic bullet theory. His response to Senator Russell was astounding. "Neither do I," he thundered. So Johnson right there says he doesn't believe the magic bullet theory either, and that's what the Warren Commission is based on. So we continue. White House aide Marvin Watson is on record saying that President Johnson personally disclosed to him that he was, quote, convinced that there was a plot in connection with the assassination. In other words, Johnson just admitted that he believed there was a conspiracy as well. Why the heck would he do that if he was in charge of the conspiracy? He'd be trying to bury it and distance himself completely. Watson continued the revelation, stating, President Johnson felt that the CIA had something to do with this plot. Why would Johnson even remotely continue to indicate that there was a conspiracy? Wouldn't he fear that the Justice Department might just open up the case based on his allegations and thus create an unwanted investigation that could lead right back to him? If Johnson was indeed the first president to be a mere puppet of the quote-unquote military-industrial complex, does it not follow then that all subsequent presidents have been as well? Carter, Clinton, Obama, Democrats. Did we, the people, lose control of the country and never got it back? Those very military people that were around in 1963, they're all gone now. And a complete new generation of people, many having been born decades after the Kennedy assassination took place. To draw a line of generational continuity from generation of military to the next is unfounded, I feel. Secret Service agent driver Bill Greer. Now, this is a big one, folks. This is one that is only taken off since YouTube, the internet, and the Zapruder film got put up on YouTube. And this is a big one. And this is one of the main ones. It's a myth, and I want to myth bust it right now, okay? This is about Secret Service agent driver Bill Greer. Okay, let me clear up a misconception that has been making the rounds on the net. There are those who claim that the Zapruder film, that most famous film of the Kennedy assassination that was in the movie JFK, shows the driver, Secret Service agent Will Greer, turning around and shooting the president with a gun in his hand. In fact, it does not. The illusion is due to low quality of the internet reproduction of the Zapruder film, The Sun That Day and The Shadows. Greer did turn around towards the president, apparently surprised and somewhat mystified that he had heard the shots ring out. Greer did the exact opposite of his Secret Service training by bringing the president's limo almost to a stop, allowing all snipers vying to get Kennedy's head in their sights an almost stationary target. Greer was trained to gun the car out of harm's way. He didn't. Was he or other Secret Service agents part of a conspiracy to assassinate the president? No, absolutely not. And Abraham Bolden told me that as well. He was the first African-American Secret Service agent handpicked by JFK as well. He doesn't believe that any of the Secret Service agents were involved in the assassination. In the cover-up? Oh, yeah. But not in the assassination itself. Others claim Greer was slowing the limo so as to let the Secret Service agents standing on the dashboards of the Secret Service protective follow-up car. Many people think that in order for them to get onto the main car that Kennedy had just been shot in, he slowed the car down so they could run and get onto the car. So that's what many people believe, to get on the car and surround the president in order to protect him. I want to say this again. It does not show Will Greer turning around and shooting JFK in the Zapruder film. On the internet, you can make an argument for that because the resolution is so bad and the quality of the original copy of the Zapruder film is so bad. I have a pristine copy, digital copy, remastered in the 90s, and you can see everything super clear, frame by frame by frame. He does turn around only his head. You can see very clearly that his two hands remain on the steering wheel. He never has anything else but the steering wheel in his hand. Okay, just to make sure that that's clear. That's a myth from the internet. Sheer nonsense. Okay. Now, here's a big controversial one. And I've had many people on who believe that the Zapruder film has been altered. I don't fall into that camp. And here we go, okay? And I can just see the emails now. Okay. Solid researchers believe that it was. David Lifton believes that it was altered, and he's a solid researcher. So I still disagree with that. Okay? Let me say once again, the main thing we all have in common, except for these small little details, is that we all believe and know there was a conspiracy. So we're together on that, okay? There is another theory circulating that goes like this. Individual frames of the Zapruder film were meticulously painted over in order to mask the kill shot coming from the front of the president. Instead, they, the conspirators of the assassination, painted in a blood spatter pattern that they presumed would show the kill shot coming from behind President Kennedy. That's Zapruder frame Z. I got you there, right? That's Canadian, baby. ZZ313, by the way. In so doing, they would have successfully, the conspirators, altered the Zapruder film in order to throw off researchers looking for a frontal shot. Okay, here's the problem with that in a nutshell. In fact, the Zapruder film does show a frontal shot, and the blood patterns are consistent with that of a frontal shot as well. So that debunks that one, in my opinion. Please see Chapter 7, Frontal Shot, 21st Century CSI. That's Sherry Fuster's work, where we discuss this very subject. The Zapruder film was and is the best evidence to show conclusively multiple shooters and thus a conspiracy in the Kennedy assassination. Now, if one had access to just such a film, instead of altering it, wouldn't it be more prudent to destroy it completely? Like, we already know that that's what the Secret Service did with their files. Right the day after they were ordered not to destroy any JFK-associated files in 1992, 93, 94, what did they do? They went out and destroyed those files, so they couldn't ever surface. They were gone. There was no record. So that's what you do with an assassin, by the way. You kill the assassin right away, and that's exactly what happened to Lee Harvey Oswald. So if you had this evidence that shows a frontal shot, and it does when it's shown in the movie JFK, back into the left, that's a frontal shot. The blood spatter that is supposed to be painted in shows a frontal shot. So if you had this film, wouldn't you doctor it so it looks like the shot is coming from the back, not the front? Well, the problem is the Zapruder film shows very clearly that the kill shot came from the front. So when those films and the Zapruder film are played back, I skipped a bit. So if one had access to such a film, instead of altering it, wouldn't one be more prudent to destroy it completely? What's more, there are other films taken by bystanders that day of the assassination. When those films and the Zapruder film are played back simultaneously, they all line up in sync. Therefore, if we are to accept the above theory that the Zapruder film was altered, that would mean very clearly the conspirators would have to have known in advance who was going to film the assassination that day, and then got all the cameras from all those people, collect all the film shot, known and unknown, all the pictures and everything else that people took, then altered them all. Well, the problem is they only had less than 24 hours to do all that, so it's absurd. Sorry, folks, this theory falls into the same category as the theory that ice bullets, quote unquote, were used to kill Kennedy. But you never heard that one before. That was one that was floating around in the 60s, by the way, because James Bond, I think, had used ice bullets in one of his movies. So many people felt, because there was no evidence of bullets and stuff in the wounds, that the bullets were ice. Well, Mythbusters themselves tried that, and when they had ice bullets, the bullets just disintegrated. As soon as the hammer of the gun hit them, they just disintegrated, so it was just bunk. Okay, so it's the same as the theory that the ice bullets were used to kill Kennedy so they would melt away and leave no traces, and the theory that the guy with the umbrella in the Zapruder film, the guy that's pushing it up and down, had a poisoned dart that was ejected, killing the president. We got to get back to reality here, and we got to get grounded. That's what I'm trying to do with this chapter. The next one we've got is a huge one that was put out as a documentary, I think on the documentary channel, if I'm not mistaken. The documentary was called JFK Beyond the Magic Bullet. It's a documentary that says they proved the magic bullet theory. BS. It's complete BS, and it is a sham. This was a documentary that was put together to prove that the magic bullet, quote unquote, could have actually happened. So it's best to let an expert explain why the documentary's conclusion was completely false. None better than NASA physicist Paul Chambers. For more on his findings and his proving of a frontal shot, please see Chapter 7, Frontal Shot, 21st Century CSI and JFK for Real. Did I mention that Paul Chambers is a NASA physicist? Yes. NASA physicist G. Paul Chambers, and here's his quote. There was a very good test done by a group in Anaheim, Australia a few years ago, sponsored by the Discovery Channel for their documentary. They lined up two dummies. One was a gel man, which is a ballistics gel put over a skeleton. They had two of them lined up, horizontally. So let's say this is JFK. Let's say this is Connolly in front of him. I should do it this way for your perspective, actually, folks. Everyone says, well, my God, Kennedy and Connolly are lined up perfectly for the shot. Okay, fine. But the problem is the vertical path that the bullet has to take. They hit the first dummy in the back. It comes out his chest, not his throat. It doesn't come out his throat. You can see clearly in the video the bullet coming out his chest. So sorry, no consistency right there. The magic bullet is debunked right there. So we continue. It goes to hit Connolly, punches through his body, breaks his rib. Everything's good. Then the bullet hits his wrist. We have a gel, simulated wrist. What happens to the bullet? It doesn't penetrate and break his wrist like it really did. It bounces off his wrist. But the real bullet that hit Connolly goes through him, shatters his wrist, leaves 3 grains of fragments inside, which exceeds the amount the bullet could have lost. You've already got 3 in his wrist, plus some fragments in Kennedy's neck, plus it lodged in his leg. The show was called JFK Beyond the Magic Bullet. Paul is bang on here. I wanted to check this out myself, folks. I watched the show in amazement. I was astounded that the documentary announcer had the audacity to say, and I'm going to quote him right here, documentary announcer, quote, amazingly, Alex, and Alex is the TV show's expert sniper. Now, Alex is perched on top of a hydraulic lift, shooting below at a non-moving stable target. Once again, the documentary announcer says, amazingly, Alex has replicated the magic bullet shot. Simply not true. He hasn't. The bullet very clearly comes out of Kennedy's chest, the dummy that represents Kennedy, not his neck. And that's what the magic bullet says. The magic bullet says it came in his back and came out his neck. It cannot. It's an outright lie. But why would a documentary lie? In the show, the video clearly shows that the shot enters Kennedy's back and exits his chest. Remember, let's be clear here. The Warren Commission's claim is that the magic bullet entered Kennedy's back between the shoulder blades and exited through JFK's throat in the front, not his chest. So you've got the difference between the bullet coming out approximately here, folks, and I'm pointing to the middle of my chest, just to the right of my heart, or his neck, which is, well, I would say 8 inches difference. It's absurd. Why does the announcer say the TV show's bullet? Let's break down what the announcer says next. Okay. What does the announcer say about the TV show's bullet? Let's break down what the announcer says next. Now, I want to be clear here. In the video, folks, it shows the bullet coming in Kennedy's back, approximately where he was really struck, but exiting Kennedy's chest. So what does the documentary announcer say? It struck Kennedy in the neck. It did not. It was nowhere near his neck, neither in the back nor the front. It's an out and out lie. This is on the documentary channel, Discovery Channel. This is a documentary that is supposed to prove the magic bullet can be replicated and was indeed factual. Instead, it does the exact opposite, but the documentary announcer, once again, let me say it again, it struck Kennedy in the neck. It did not. The TV show clearly shows their bullet entering the JFK dummy replica's back in between the shoulder blades, approximately 6 inches below the back of the neck. At no time does the TV show's bullet even come near the JFK dummy's replica's neck, back or front. The word neck, you see, folks, is used by the TV show to trigger in your mind confirmation of their testing to recreate the magic bullet. If you're not that familiar with the magic bullet theory, you might say to yourself, well, that sounds correct. Wasn't there a neck wound or something associated with JFK and the magic bullet? Yes, indeed there was, but according to the Warren Commission's magic bullet theory, that neck wound is an exit wound, not an entrance wound, and it is found on the front of JFK, not on his back. Then the documentary announcer continues, streaking through to Connolly. So what's wrong with this? This is wrong. The TV show's video clearly shows their bullet streaks through the JFK dummy replica's chest, approximately at the sternum, not a foot above where the real wound is in JFK's neck. And by the way, that JFK neck wound is a frontal shot. All the doctors at Parkland have said that, by the way. So once again, there's proof of a conspiracy. Notice once again their use of language. They don't mention exit wound. Instead, they say streaking through. So fake news, right? It's false news. I mean, this is a documentary. They're supposed to be accurate. They're not even accurate with their own video. How pathetic is that? And this is Discovery Channel. They must have spent several $1 million on this thing. The TV show can now avoid using the word chest to describe where their bullet exited the JFK dummy replica from. This lets the TV show completely off the hook in facing the truth, folks. Their multi-million-dollar attempt at proving the magic bullet theory has failed and has failed miserably. So quite simply, they chose to lie and misinform. How the mainstream media, folks, can continue to get away with this stuff over and over and over is absolutely mind-boggling. What this does prove beyond doubt is that the angles that those who are trying to use to prove the magic bullet theory are indeed wrong. It is what we have known all along, that a shot that enters at the angle where it did on JFK's back cannot ever exit JFK's throat without traveling upward once inside JFK's body. And in order for the bullet to change course and deflect upward, that would mean it would have to hit something, and hit something hard. The only thing hard enough for that is bone. And if it hit bone, the bullet would have to deform. Yet this magic bullet, Warren Commission CE 399, the bullet that they claim did all this damage, has no such deformity. And on top of that, are you ready for this one? It didn't have any blood or tissue on it. So this bullet that they claim caused 7 wounds on Kennedy and Governor Connolly didn't have any blood or tissue on it. Yeah. So, as we just stated, the only way for the magic bullet to exit JFK's throat is that it would have to be traveling in an upward direction. But if it was traveling in an upward direction, think about this for a second. It's coming out of Kennedy's throat in an upward direction. Where would it go? To the sky. It certainly wouldn't go into Connolly sitting in front of him. It would not have been found conveniently lying on a Parkland hospital gurney in pristine condition with no blood or tissue on it, like it has been fired into cotton perhaps, or water to be planted later. There is a whole bunch of crucial information left out of the TV show as well. And here's where I continue to debunk this TV show. For example, in the TV show, the test shot is fired from a Mannlicher Carcano rifle, as was the original alleged magic bullet shot. There are, however, many discrepancies. First of all, the scope is new and high-tech on the TV show's rifle, and it is not misaligned and basic as it was on the original. The original scope, folks, was barely hanging on, okay? The TV show rifle had its barrel end of the rifle gaffer taped firm to a railing and held solid on a tripod instead of being held by hand as it was in the original. So once again, you know, they're trying to prove this thing, bypassing the reality of it. There was barely enough room to get that rifle in the corner where Oswald said to have been. The scope was misaligned and was hanging off. It wasn't on a tripod. He was hand holding it. So right away, it's going to be off kilter. It's unbelievable. So President Kennedy was a moving target and not a stationary target, as was in the TV show. That's a huge difference and advantage. Just ask any hunter. What's easier to shoot at, a moving target or a stationary one? In the TV show, the sniper, his name's Alex, had ample room and was not cramped. He wasn't pushed up against the wall, bending over at a bad angle, as was the case in the original sniper's nest on the 6th floor. There were no time constraints, and the test sniper had all the time in the world to aim and target. Alex, the TV show sniper, had fired practice shots, as a matter of fact, in advance of the final one. And yet, surprise, surprise, try as they will, they still could not duplicate this magic bullet. Bottom line, the TV show's bullet entered almost where the original magic bullet did, in the upper back shoulder just to the right of JFK's vertebrae. But the TV show bullet did not exit the JFK dummy replica's throat. It exited JFK's chest in the show, and they glossed over it completely. So why? Why would they do that? Simply because the angle from the 6th floor sniper's nest is too steep to enter Kennedy's back and exit his throat. So to achieve this scenario, the sniper would have to be standing at street level, almost level with the car. We know that this is one scenario that never happened. More proof the magic bullet is hokum. Paul Chambers, so the whole thing collapses like a house of cards. And as you discussed, there was only 3 casings found at the school book depository. 4 shots means another shooter. That means, as you said, a conspiracy. And just that information alone forces you to that conclusion. Paul says, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. He's a NASA physicist, okay? He's not a conspiracy theorist, but I'm a conspiracy empiricist, because that's what the data forces you to conclude. There's no other there's no other possibilities consistent with the laws of physics. Okay, this is another one, and this is the open windows in Dealey Plaza. I know in the movie JFK, Man X mentions the fact that there was a lot of windows in Dealey Plaza that should have been closed. Yes, I'm not going to disagree with that. Was it common practice? Probably where they could. However, there is precedent where there's many instances where there was a motorcade with JFK in it, sitting on the back of the car, as a matter of fact, his bum on the trunk and his legs on the back seat, windows open everywhere and people hanging out everywhere. Okay, here we go. There's a theory that all the open windows in Dealey Plaza were a clear indication that something was amiss in the president's protection, November 22nd, 1963. Unfortunately, this theory falls flat as well. If you look at any photos of JFK's motorcades throughout his presidency, Hawaii and Ireland are a great example. There were always windows open along the routes. Very often JFK rode in an open-roofed car. And often actually sat perched on the back trunk. His feet were on the back seat. He was wide open for any sniper attack. The Secret Service doing their best to keep up, running alongside the car, but often not in sight or anywhere near close enough to the president should an emergency arise. 1963 context, okay? Nobody was expecting. I mean, that was the idea, is to expose the president to as many people as possible, get him to shake hands, get him to have interpersonal reaction, get people to have their own interconnection with him. I saw the president up close and personal, blah, blah, blah. It would help him get reelected, okay? Much, much different today. It changed November 23rd, 1963. They woke up. It was just the way they protected the president in those days. Today, the president travels in an armored car some say could withstand a small nuke. Different era, different method. Okay, the three tramps. Looking at the time. Minutes after the shots rang out in DEALEY Plaza, this is something else that was in the movie JFK. They were discussing the three tramps with new clothes on, etc., etc. Minutes after the shots rang out in DEALEY Plaza and the motorcade was speeding President Kennedy to Parkland Hospital, the Dallas police cordoned off many areas of the plaza and started to round up mysterious-looking people. Just behind the picket fence on the Grassy Knoll is a parking lot with several train tracks running through it. There were several train cars, boxcars, parked on a track siding that happened to contain quote-unquote hobos. Now, folks, the word hobo isn't used much anymore. Hobos are homeless folks who in those days, when long-distance car travel was still in its infancy, used empty train cars to travel from one place to another instead of hitchhiking like most do today. The Dallas police took 3 men off a boxcar and walked through DEALEY Plaza to the police station at the corner of Main and Houston for questioning. There's pictures of them showing many think it's Woody Harrelson's father. They think it's E. Howard Hunt. All that is nonsense, okay? I'm going to tell you right now, it is nonsense. It was a good call by the DPD, Dallas Police Force, as the vast majority of witnesses heard shots coming from the Grassy Knoll. They'd also raced up there seconds after the assassination in order to get the shooter. Makes sense, right? It would make perfect sense, therefore, that an exit strategy for the assassins may include a quick, convenient train ride out of Dallas. While trudging across the plaza, these 3 men and their police escorts were photographed many times. Here is where the problem started to arise. The 3 men were questioned and then released. When earlier researchers tried to find out who they were, no evidence of their police files or questioning was found. When these same early researchers came upon the photographs, they noticed that for hobos and tramps, their clothes looked brand new and not dirty and worn. Again, I'm going to reference the movie JFK, and they talk about this very fact. Next, the researchers started to examine the faces of the 3 tramps, and many became convinced they were looking at CIA operatives E. Howard Hunt and Frank Sturgis, later to gain fame as the Watergate burglars working for President Nixon. Another was believed to be Charles Harrelson, a known mafia hitman. He was also actor Woody Harrelson's father. It must be stated clearly that Woody Harrelson had very little to do with his father while growing up, and absolutely had nothing to do with the JFK assassination. As a matter of fact, I think he was born in 65 or 66 or something, well after, okay? There's no connection there whatsoever. The only connection is that his biological father, Charles Harrelson, was a known mafia hitman. Another tramp that was thought to be that of Johnny Roselli, who was also a mafioso. In Oliver Stone's film, JFK, covers the possibilities that the 3 tramps somehow being involved in the assassination as late as when the movie came out in 1991. As it turns out, all of the above was unwarranted speculation and completely inaccurate. Because in 1992, too late to edit the movie, it's already out, author and researcher Mary LaFontaine exposed that the 3 tramps were in fact really, well, they were just that, 3 tramps. It seems that the Dallas police had misfiled the reports and questioning of the three and had rediscovered the files in 1989, consequently releasing them to the public. I want to be clear here. Let's not forget that up until around 1998, files were always hard copies. They were kept in filing cabinets, storage boxes, and were always notoriously misfiled. Always. I mean, this was common knowledge back in those days. There was no going to your computer and pulling up a file using a search engine, okay? You had to go down to the basement, often at a dark, dingy basement, and hopefully find the box that had your hard copy of the file in it. Good luck with that. This has since changed with digital online filing and search engines. During research, Mary had come across the files and the names of three tramps: Gus W. Abrams, Harold Doyle, and John F. Gedney. She then personally followed up with the three to verify the story and released her book. Even Stone now admits with this new revelation that he got that one wrong. So the three tramps were three tramps. The limousine bubble top. This is another myth that I want to bust, okay? Ancient theories about the assassination believed that the Secret Service was somehow complicit in the assassination of JFK. Now, one of the theories surrounding this for evidence was the removal of the plexiglass bubble top roof that sat atop JFK's presidential limo, allowing any sniper's unobstructed, pristine target in the open car. Now, the bubble top roof was used on occasion when there was adverse weather conditions. In truth, it was rarely used. Under the sun, it would act as an incubator, holding the heated air in the car. Now, in those days, folks, nobody, and I mean nobody, had air conditioning in their car. So imagine being in a suit and tie, 90-degree weather. Well, we've all been there, right? If the air conditioner doesn't work, you're done for, okay? So you're literally in an incubator. Maybe a dozen cars had air conditioning in those days. The president's was one of those, but it was woefully inadequate. Terrible stuff in those days when it first came out. So it was used solely to keep the president dry in the rain. And indeed, it had been a torrential downpour that morning in Dallas before the president arrived. So how and why was the bubble top removed? Here is the true story of why it was removed. A young reporter by the name of Jim Lehrer, by the way, that's the same Jim Lehrer that now has the profoundly respected PBS show, the Jim Lehrer Report, I believe it's called, was present that day at Dallas's Love Field Airport, assigned to cover the arrival of Air Force One and the president's entourage. He's just a young reporter. Jim is quoted as saying that he clearly saw that the bubble top was originally on the president's limo. It was all lined up before the plane landed. Lehrer approached a Secret Service agent and casually asked if the bubble top's roof on the president's limo was going to be on or off during the upcoming motorcade through downtown Dallas. Now, this was strictly for photographs and television cameras covering the motorcade so they could adjust their camera's aperture accordingly. Absolutely nothing sinister or malice intended. A Secret Service agent who knew Jim cordially greeted him and quizzically said that he simply wasn't sure, didn't know if it was going to be on or off. The agent radioed the downtown area where the motorcade would pass to see if there was any rain happening, because you don't want your president wet. I mean, you got Mrs. Kennedy beside you, the governor, blah, 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 all those people. You would put it on to keep them dry. And as I said, there had been torrential downpour earlier on the day. The response came back. No, indeed. Everything was clear. The sun had come out. The agent turned and then ordered the Secret Service agents to remove the bubble top roof. So let me read this again. This is why. A Secret Service agent who knew Jim cordially greeted him and quizzically said he simply wasn't sure. The agent then radioed the downtown area where the motorcade would pass to see if there was any rain. The response came back that no, indeed, everything was clear. The sun had come out. The agent turned and then ordered other Secret Service agents to remove the bubble top. Once again, it was on to begin with, and then they took it off. It was as simple as that. No conspiracy. If it was still raining, the roof would have remained on. Now the sun was out, the temperature was rising, it was off. It should also be noted that the bubble top roof was not bulletproof and made only of plexiglass. However, should it have remained on the car, it would have caused grief to the snipers targeting Kennedy. Given on or off, the assassins were primed to kill the president. Had the bubble top been in place, well, they would have shot at the car anyway, but without accuracy. Consequently, the bullets, I'm sure, piercing the plexiglass, I mean, they just would have ricocheted everywhere. It would have been an absolute bloodbath inside the car. Probably would have killed Jackie Kennedy and Nellie Connolly and shot to pieces. And, blood everywhere, countless bystanders. Jim Lear goes on to say that around midnight at the Dallas police station after the assassination, that same Secret Service agent came to him in tears and said, "Oh, Jim, only if I hadn't removed the bubble top." So there you have it, some of the myths broken down. Stick around for the next hour. I'm Brent Holland. We'll see you all next time. Take care of each other out there.